So the new movie Aladdin is coming out this week. Anybody kind of excited about that? You know, to go see Aladdin. I don't know. There is some excitement. It's the live action remake of the 1992 animation, Disney film Aladdin. And so if what I'm about to say here in the next few moments kind of spoils it for you, I do not feel sorry at all. You've had 27 years to watch this movie or to watch some play. In fact, I was kind of reintroduced to Aladdin again, just as like a month ago or so. My son Owen actually, in his middle school play, played Aladdin. And so I got to go, and wow, the quality of production level since I was in school has elevated to a whole nother level. It was amazing. Got to watch Aladdin. But there are two scenes in this movie, pretty critical moments in the movie, interactions between Aladdin and Princess Jasmine, and where a key question is asked. And the first one happens when they're running away from the palace guard. They've only known each other for a very short amount of time, minutes in fact, and they're running away from the palace guard, and they get into this precarious situation where it's going to require a harrowing jump. And Aladdin says to Jasmine, "Do you trust me?" And she says, "What?" And he says, "Do you trust me?" And as the audience, because it's a romantic Disney fantasy movie, we're all like, "Yes, trust him, just do it, just say yes." And she does. She says, "Yes." And then they jump. And they end up getting caught within seconds anyway. And so she doesn't know him. She doesn't know who he is, but "Yes, I trust you." And we're all like, "Oh, she trusts him." And then it happens again. She's in the palace, and she feels like a prisoner in her own palace and subject to the laws of the land and her own father. And Aladdin shows up as this prince, Prince Ali, and she doesn't know him. In fact, first interaction, she's not very impressed with him, doesn't really know him at all. But in this moment of frustration, he shows up with this magic carpet. And he wants to take her for a ride because "I could show you the world." It's that kind of thing. And so right as he's inviting her to go on the carpet ride, he says, "Do you trust me?" And she's like, "What? Do you trust me?" "Yes." And off they go on this magical, romantic carpet ride. It's a whole new world. I mean, all these wonderful things are happening, to which her dreams are crushed when she realizes he's not who he says he is. She feels betrayed. He lied to her. She can't believe it. Even though she didn't know him, she's so in shock. But it's a Disney movie. It's a romantic fantasy. So what happens? Well, what happens is Jafar, gets destroyed, and the genie is freed, and the Sultan changes the laws of the land, and Jasmine and Aladdin get to be together in love with the one she wanted, and it ends so beautifully and romantic, and all is well. That is the way Disney romantic fantasies end. But it's not how it works in real life, is it? Not like that. No, in fact, people who trust people before they have come to know people, without fail, constantly feel hurt and betrayed. In fact, when you trust people before you know people, you compromise your emotional safety and your mental judgment. It's not a healthy thing to do. It's not a safe thing to do. You will feel hurt. You will be betrayed, because trust is intensely bonding. It bonds you together with someone else. It's placing your heart, a piece of your heart, into the hands of someone else. It's taking steps of trust, and with every step, you're entrusting yourself to someone more and more. You're drawing closer to that person. Now, that person can certainly be a boyfriend or a girlfriend or someone you're dating. It can be your spouse, but it can also just be a friend. It can be a coworker. It can be an employee. It can be an employer-employee relationship where you're coming to entrust someone with more and more. You trust them. But the question is, do you know them? Are they trustworthy? Are they someone that you should entrust something to? Because sometimes we can be careless with our trust. In fact, one of the primary causes of hurt in relationships, and we began learning this last week, is the accelerated pace of relationships, where we're moving so fast in our culture. In dating relationships in our culture, people are becoming physically and sexually involved with each other and trusting one another before they even know one another. It is a very unhealthy dynamic that's happening in our culture right now. And so we began to just talk about, what do healthy relationships look like? Last week, I introduced the RAM model, the relationship attachment model, which was developed by Dr. Van Epp. He wrote a book called How to Avoid Falling in Love with a Jerk. It's a great book. It's actually really good about relationship dynamics. And he talked about the 5 dynamics of bonding and attachment in relationships, which is to know, to trust, rely, commit, and touch. In other words, the level to which you know someone, the level to which you trust someone, the level to which you rely on someone, the level to which you commit to somebody, and the level to which you're physically engaged or involved with somebody, which obviously, if you are sexually involved with someone, then you should be committed to them in a marriage relationship. When these things get out of balance, it's a very unhealthy dynamic whenever we're in dating relationships. So if you're in a dating relationship, you use this for relational development, which means the order matters. You never progress further in one area than you have in the previous. That's why what you see here is a very unhealthy dynamic in the relationship. You wouldn't trust someone that you have not come to know. It's very important. So it's a great tool for dating, but it's also a great tool for marriage. In marriage, you use this for relationship maintenance, which means there are areas in your relationship where you may be struggling or dropping a little bit that needs some effort, some work for that relationship to be even more healthy and more intimate with one another as a relationship. And so we're kind of using this for our relationships as we enter into a relationship series. We're in a series called This Could Be Us. We're talking about what healthy relationships look like. And today I want to talk about trust in our relationships. Trust, by definition, it can be defined as feeling safe and secure. It's feeling safe and secure in a relationship. It is a firm belief. It's your mental picture or a firm belief in the honesty, the integrity, the reliability, even the justice of another person or thing. You're trusting them because they've proven reliable to you. So depending on the person, depends on whether you trust them or not. That's why if someone were to come up to me and say, "Hey, Wayne, close your eyes." Well, depending on who said that would depend on whether I actually close my eyes or not, right? It's like if you're in our office and one of our other staff people have a ball in their hands, you always keep them in your peripheral at all times because it'll either be a high shot or a low shot the minute you turn your head. And so we've just learned, you don't take your eyes off somebody who's holding something in their hands because there's some trust issues there, at least on that front. Trust is important. Trust is at the core of intimacy. The more your level of trust goes up, the greater the relationship is. Relationships are fueled by trust. It's important. And so what I want to talk about today is how do you increase trust in a healthy way? What does that look like? And the very first point I'm going to make today is this. You have to avoid prematurely trusting someone you don't know. You have to avoid prematurely trusting someone that you don't know. This applies to every area of life. Dating relationships, employee-employer relationships. And the reason for this is whenever your trust exceeds the level to which you know someone, it's not healthy. You never want your level of trust to exceed the level to which you know someone. This is very important. There are 2 appropriate reasons for not trusting someone. One is you don't know them. You are not required to trust somebody you don't know. And the other reason, it's an appropriate reason for not trusting them is because you do know them. And you're not required to trust someone you do know if there are things about them that have proved untrustworthy. And so we use the time of getting to know someone, we use that time to then help us learn to trust them as well. You see, trust is not given. Trust is earned. Trust is something you earn over time. That's why last week we said we got to take it slow to get to know. This know dynamic is so critical in the relationship. And if you were not here last week, this kind of builds on each other. I want to encourage you to go to the Northside Christian YouTube page and watch that, or go to our website and watch or use the app. But I want you to watch about what it looks like to get to know someone, because as you know them better, you can also then grow to trust them more. You earn trust. You don't demand trust. You earn it. So in friendships, you use this to say, would they be a good friend? Can you trust them to be a good friend? In dating, you would use this to say, could they be a potential spouse that I might commit myself to? If it's in business, you would say, would they be a good employee or a good coworker? Would they be a good someone to hire? Would they be a good someone to promote? And that's based on your knowledge of them. Employers are using more and more tools and money and time and effort to get to know people, right? Because they have found out it is expensive to fire them. And it is hard to replace them. And it takes time and it takes money. Man, it would sure help if we could really get to know them. What are some ways and tools that we can do that so that we can hire people, promote people, work with people that we can really trust in our relationship? So this is helpful in every relationship that we deal with. It's helpful in leadership. Does this person have character, competency, abilities, lifestyle? Have we observed those things? In fact, even here at Northside, when someone gets involved in a leadership layer that involves our elders and deacons, which is a small group that gets together once a month for vision and training and planning. In fact, we'll get together today and we're going to be looking at the budget for the next year about what do we want to do? Where's our emphasis going to go for ministry and what's that going to look like? And so we'll be doing that today. But every one of those leaders that now come into leadership, they go through a year of development before they ever get to actually officially be called a deacon or before they even become an elder. And so that means they're reading 4 different books. They're having discussions with people about it. They then spend an entire year attending our meetings with us so that we can get to know them even more than we already do to find out, is this somebody that we would trust in that level of leadership? You want to trust people you've come to know. And that's what the Bible reveals. Over and over again, all throughout Scripture, we entrust more to people who have proven trustworthy. So I'll give you an example of this. In Exodus 18, Moses has led the Israelite people out of Egypt, and he's got 1 million people that he's providing oversight for. They're coming to Moses with their issues, their problems, their disputes. And Moses' father-in-law comes to visit Moses, and he finds Moses sitting there from morning till night, and there's a line. And the people are coming to him, and he's judging their disputes. And Jethro's going, this isn't good for Moses, and this is not good for the people. And so Jethro says in Exodus chapter 18 and verse 21, he says to Moses, Moses, select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men, who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. He's saying, Moses, take a shared leadership role and start trusting people that you know that can be trusted and let them lead. Teachers, pastors, preachers, leaders, employers. I mean, how many people struggle to delegate leadership and allow other people to lead? And the reason they don't let them do it is because they don't trust them. But if they know the person and they've proven trustworthy and they still refuse to trust them with leadership, then it's not a trust issue, it's a control issue. A lot of leaders confuse control with leadership. They want to be in control. Control's not leadership. Good leaders are not in control. There's a difference between leadership and control. So people who want to be in control, they don't make good leaders. But wise leaders do what Jethro said and what the Apostle Paul says, which we'll touch on next week, and even what Jesus says. They allow and trust others to lead who have proven trustworthy. In fact, Jesus said to the Pharisees in Luke 16, verse 10, Jesus says, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, he's talking to the Pharisees, who will trust you with true riches, with spiritual riches of heaven? Who would trust you with that when you can't even handle worldly wealth in a trustworthy way? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No one can serve 2 masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. The Pharisees, who loved money, heard all this and were sneering at Jesus. He said to them, you are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight. And Jesus just tells these Pharisees right here now, why would God entrust you with the spiritual riches of heaven when you can't even be entrusted with worldly wealth? You mishandle it, you're greedy, you're materialistic, you love vanity. That's what you love. You love attention, You're not trustworthy to be handed more. That's not who God's going to hand the kingdom over to. So Jesus even dealt with this as well. What you do with the little things reveals what you do with the big things. You can be a stock boy in a grocery store, and if you embezzle from your organization, from your company, you're sure going to do it when you're a CEO. It's just going to be to a greater extreme. If you are foolish in how you spent your last $5, you'll probably be foolish with how you spend your money if you won the lottery. If you tithe from the little that you receive, then you're more likely to tithe from something big that you receive because you've been faithful with the little things. If God doesn't control the little things in our life, He's sure not going to get all of us. He's sure not going to get our whole heart or our whole lives. That's why to prove faithful, we got to be trustworthy with the little things. Jesus said in Luke 12:48, He said in this text, "From the one who's been entrusted with much, much more will be asked." There's a biblical principle where to those who are proving trustworthy to God, He gives more to them to be trustworthy with. That doesn't just mean like money or riches. It means whatever He's entrusting you, He will give you more in relationship to what you have proven trustworthy with. So even in Scripture, we give more trust to those who are proving trustworthy. Jesus said it. Great leaders said it. That we trust those we know. And we don't prematurely trust somebody that we don't know. It's based on what they've done with what they've already been given. So don't rush this process. Don't trust someone before you get to know them. But also, number two is this. Avoid refusing to trust someone because of past hurt. These are the extremes. We either trust too soon or we are too skeptical. And we refuse to trust. We become suspicious, too suspicious. So it's hard, it's smart to hold back trusting someone that you don't know. But if someone then begins to prove over time with sufficient reason, with persistence, that you should trust them and you are reluctant to do it because of past hurt, because you're struggling to develop appropriate trust, and maybe that's because you've experienced hurt, betrayal, maybe you endured some childhood abuse or neglect or mistreatment, you can begin to be filled with cynicism. You can begin to be filled with overgeneralization. If you've been hurt by a spouse in the past, then you begin to see every man or every woman as a cheater or an abuser or a taker from you. You can become so guarded that you're unwilling to be vulnerable. And if trust is at the core of intimacy and relationships, then you will struggle to ever have intimacy and relationships again because you refuse to trust again. Your dating partner can do something right 100 times. Your spouse can do something right 100 times. And the one time they do something wrong, you're like, I knew it, your true colors would come out. Those 100 times were exceptions. And the one time, that's who you really are. We can become very jaded if we're not careful. Dr. Van Epp shares a story in his book. I want to share it with you about a true story about Melissa and about Joe. Melissa was married to Joe. But as their relationship continued, it became apparent that Joe, at times, occasionally, not all the time, but he would go into these fits of rage. And he'd be furious. In fact, like one time they were working out in the garage and in their yard, and he was frustrated about the level of work and that the kids should have done some of the work and that they let it go for so long. And next thing Melissa knew, she was being pinned up against the garage door, and he had a squeeze on her arm, and he was screaming at her, taking it out on her in that moment. It was scary. It was frightening to her when it happened. And sometimes, 5 or 6 months would go by before he would do it. Every once in a while, maybe a week or two would go by before he would have one of those fits. And she tried to talk to him about it. She was scared about what happened. And she would try to address it with him, but he always denied that he actually hurt her. He would never really hurt her. And he denied that he had an emotional issue or problem that needed to be addressed. And he refused help or talking to someone. And when she even mentioned maybe there's something that would help calm him down, some medication that made him angry, so he would threaten her whenever she talked to him about this. But then sometimes there'd be enough time between an episode where her hurt and her anger would subside, and she'd begin to go on as if nothing happened. She would begin to trust him again by just dismissing those spells when they happened. In other words, what that means is in spite of what she actually knew about him, she trusted him at a whole nother level. It was an unhealthy dynamic in their relationship. Even after the time that Joe broke her arm, she didn't report him. She had too much trust in him because she wanted so bad for the relationship to work. But after 12 years of marriage, Joe divorced her. And he announced he was leaving her. And after he left, it was soon discovered that he had been seeing someone behind her back for some time, and she was crushed. She was alone. She was betrayed. She was hurt. And for Melissa, she began growing a stereotype, an overgeneralization in her mind, what all partners are like, what all men are like. They're abusers, and they're cheaters, and they're takers. And that began to affect some of the other dating. When she started dating a couple years later, it started to affect those relationships, especially the good one, which was with Matthew. Matthew was a great guy. And he began to see Melissa, and they began to date. He had proved himself trustworthy over time. But there were some just really difficult moments in the relationship, like the time when Melissa had broken her phone, and she was going away on a trip, and she was nervous about it. And Matthew just said, hey, I want you to take my phone, that way you have a phone with you on your trip. And he goes, the only thing I need is I do use that also for work, and so if there's any messages that get to that phone, you just need to tell me what they are. Relay that back to me. It's important. Well, she went on her trip, and 2 messages that got left on that phone, she failed to relay them to Matthew. He shows up at work the next day, and he gets berated by his boss because of it. He gets in trouble for it. When she gets back from her trip, he's obviously frustrated and angry and upset, and he's trying to address it with her, and he's angry about what happened. And immediately when he begins to express anger to her, because she has not dealt with her own trust issues from before, she immediately begins getting defensive and shutting down and avoiding him and withdrawing from him. And she's doing the very things that she began to do with Joe to protect herself from him, projecting those things on Matthew. He wasn't being violent. He wasn't being physically abusive at all. He was just angry, wanting to communicate with her about it. Over time, he began to realize what was going on, that until Melissa, because she knew him and could trust him, until she was willing to trust him to the level that she knew him, unless she was willing to do that, the relationship couldn't grow. The relationship couldn't become what it could become. Their dating relationship would have to end if she couldn't somehow trust Matthew with the knowledge she had of him without projecting the things from Joe onto him. In that story, we began to realize that our trust should match the level to which we know someone. In other words, your relationships are no stronger than the amount of trust that you put into them. Your relationships are no stronger than the level of trust to which you put into them. And so if you're struggling with a level of trust, you may need to grow that area based on what you now know about that person. Trust is the security that makes those relationships possible. So what I want to ask really quick is, what do you do if you've done something that has betrayed the trust? What happens if you've done something? Now, it could be something major, or it could be something simple. Maybe you just forgot something, or you didn't follow through, or you didn't give 2 messages that you were supposed to give off of a phone. What happens when that trust is betrayed? How do you build trust back again? What's the way back to broken trust? Well, the way back is the same thing you would do for something else that's broken. I remember when I think I was about a sophomore in high school, when after church on a Sunday night, I went down to our gym, and of course there was no adult supervision, and there was a volleyball referee stand that was there in the gym, and it was just sitting in there, and I was bored and had a basketball, and I had a volleyball stand. So I drug that thing over in front of the basketball goal, and I was doing my best Michael Jordan impersonations and dunking the basketball, and then I kept scooting it further back, because it was like, ooh, I could do that. So I'm back, I was like almost to the free throw line kind of thing, almost, and I just, this thing sit really high, so I was just like flying, yeah, and I dunked the basketball, and apparently my momentum was going so fast that as I dunked it, my feet went out from under me, and then at some point I let go of the rim, and then landed on my right arm and broke my humerus bone right here, just poof. And it was not funny when it happened, incredibly painful, but I ended up getting put in a cast. Literally, it was one of these. In order for the bone to come together, I had to have the cast around my arm, around my entire body with a pole that went from here to here. As a sophomore in high school who, That was a little humiliating, walking around school with all the girls, like, me, what's going on, And my mom even had to cut all my shirts and Velcro so that I could stick my arm in, bring it over the arm, and Velcro them down. And then you're walking around school for weeks like this, everywhere you turn, you're bumping people. Man, watch where you're going. I was such the nerd. I mean, it was horrible that I had to live like that. But here's the thing. When you break something, it gets restricted. And the reason it gets restricted is so it can heal. This is the same thing that happens when you break trust. Everything in that relationship has to get restricted so it can heal. If you had an affair and you come back repentant and you're wanting your marriage to heal and to change and your spouse doesn't trust you anymore, that means some things need to be restricted. There's some new boundaries in place. There may be some new rules about your phone, requirements that have to do with counseling. There's an accountability partner that you would have to find. They'd have to know where you were at all times. You might have something like Life 360 so your spouse could see where you were at all times. Why? Because they don't trust you. And you say, well, I beg for forgiveness. I've asked for forgiveness. They need to forgive me. Yeah, they should, but there's a difference between forgiveness and trust. They could forgive you, but there's a big difference between forgiveness and trust. And here's the big difference. Forgiveness is given, but trust is earned. I'm commanded to forgive you over time. I'm commanded to work through my own forgiveness, to forgive you when you desire that forgiveness. But that doesn't mean I trust you. Your trust is earned over time with new behavior. And so you need things to be restricted in your life. You give up freedoms so that healing can take place. So if you hurt your spouse, there may be moments where you go through a season of restriction so that healing can take place. And then maybe we can begin to have some more freedoms again when we prove faithful and trustworthy. So how do you increase trust in a healthy way? Well, you don't trust someone prematurely without knowing them. And you don't refuse to trust someone just because of past hurt. You come to a place where you can trust again. But also, you need to work to become a trustworthy person. You need to work to become a trustworthy person. When you are in the process of rebuilding trust, you've got to be consistent. You've got to be consistent in your words. You've got to be consistent in your actions, because that consistency will bring security, and that security will eventually bring trust again. You got to be a man or a woman of your word. You got to show up and be who God's called you to be. You got to fill the commitments that you're making to people, and you don't keep secrets from your mate. Those of you who are married, your spouse should have a master key to your life, to every area of your life. And you say, well, I'm not sure I want them to have a master key to every area of my life. Well, maybe you shouldn't have gotten married, because in marriage, secrets are not healthy. They're the same as lies. When you have secrets in your relationship, then your spouse, when they learn those secrets later, will feel like you've lied to them. It'll feel the same to them. We have to be open, honest, transparent. She has access to every area of my life. I'm going to have conversation. And that means I'm not going to have conversations I wouldn't want her to hear. I'm not going to look at things I wouldn't want her to know I'm looking at. I'm not going to go places I wouldn't want her to know that I'm going. I'm going to be an open book. That's how you become a trustworthy person. It's openness. It's honesty. It's not keeping secrets. It's allowing time to happen so they can get to know you again and build that trust. That's what you do when trust has been broken. And then let me give you the final way to build trust in a relationship. It's always trust the truth. Always trust the truth. You have got to trust people who speak truth into your life. There's this text from Proverbs 27:6. It says, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. In other words, enemies always, multiplying kisses. Oh, you're great, you're great. But a friend will speak the truth even when it hurts. They'll tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. You should always trust the truth, because if you push back from the truth, you will eventually be surrounded by people who aren't telling you the truth because you didn't want to hear it. And when you're surrounded by people who don't want to tell you the truth, You're surrounded by people who are not good for you. They're not healthy for you. So trust people who speak truth into your life. But then I want to say this, which even surpasses that, which is you've got to trust God over anyone and everything. Yeah, we want to grow in our trust for people, and we should. The Bible talks about this, that we should come to trust people that we've come to know. This is something that should grow, that builds relationships and closeness and intimacy in our relationships. That's healthy. But never trust anyone before you trust God. He is to be trusted above anyone and everything else, even yourself. He is to be trusted even over yourself. Here's what the Bible warns in Jeremiah chapter 17, 5 and 7. It says, this is what the Lord says. Cursed is the one who trusts in man, who draws strength from mere flesh and whose heart turns away from the Lord. But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. When you trust in mere man, when all of your hope and all of your trust is in a person, you're going to fall hard if that's where your trust is. And what he's revealing in Jeremiah is, man, some people, they build their relationships on their wealth because they trust in money. Some people who are politically powerful, they trust in their social networking. Those people who seek stability, they may find their trust, but their trust in military might and physical strength. We put our trust in all these things. Some people put their trust in their own intellect, their own ability, who they are, what they think. But the Bible reveals that when we trust in that and we put those things ahead of God, when we trust in people and we don't trust in the Lord, we are setting ourselves up for destruction. It's a warning for us. Proverbs 34, 5 through 6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. Don't trust in yourself, trust in him. In all your ways, in your dating ways, in your financial ways, in your marriage ways, in your relationship ways, in all of your hobby ways, in all your ways acknowledge him. Not some of your ways, not a few of them, but in all of them submit to him. Submit to him. Because when Jesus Christ is Lord of your life, when you submit to the Lord in every single way, you are trusting in one who will never fail you. You are trusting in one who can deliver you. You are trusting in one who will take you all the way to glory. You're trusting in one who will bring you all the way to heaven. You're trusting in one that will help you through life's pains and hurts when people let you down, when they fall, when they sin. You have one who is stronger and greater. You put your trust in him. There's no one greater to put your trust in. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your path straight. And people who trust him, they're healthy, they're whole. They can begin to love others in their relationships in a healthy way. They can begin to build trust in the people around them in healthy ways, in healthy dynamics, because trust is at the core of our intimacy, not just with people, it's at the core of our intimacy with God. And so the question is, if you've come to know God for who he is and what he's done, if you know who he is and you know who you are, then you should be in a place where you should trust him with everything you have. And some of you have not been trusting God with everything you have. I don't know what you've been trusting him, but you haven't been trusting in him. You're not trusting his word. You're not trusting his direction. You're not trusting him for your future. You're not trusting him through your struggle, through your chaos, through your pain, through your disease, through your sickness. And today, God would say, trust him. Your relationship with God is no deeper than the level to which you trust him with your life. And so if you're not trusting him, then you don't have a good relationship with him. And what I want to encourage you to do right now is to give a declaration of your trust. There's lots of ways you could do that, but here's one way. Today, when you eat of that bread, which represents the body of Jesus, when we serve communion in a moment, and when you drink of that cup representing the blood of Jesus that was poured out for you, when you drink of that, that is a declaration that says, Jesus, I trust you. I trust your death on the cross to pay the price for my sins. I trust you to buy back and redeem me. I trust your blood to cover over my sins and to forgive me. Jesus, I don't trust in myself. I can't save myself. I don't trust in my own strength and power. I'm not strong enough. But Jesus, I trust in you to save me. And I trust in you to take me to glory. And I trust in you, so I want to give you my life and my heart, my mind. I want to love you with everything that I have because I trust you. Let this be a declaration, Jesus. As I eat and drink of this, it's my declaration. I trust you, what you have done for me, because I have the knowledge that Jesus is the Christ. He's the Son of the living God, and he paid the price for my sins on that cross, and he was put in that grave, but 3 days later, he was raised from that tomb to declare his victory over sin. I trust you. Let that be your declaration. So I'm going to ask that our servers be dismissed. I'm going to ask you to stand to your feet, and let's sing this song right now of our trust in you.